Hey everybody. The human malware we've been dealing with for the past 12 months has really taken a toll on mail and shipping systems. For example, I ordered this 12 months ago and it just showed up this week. I'm going to explore what this is and what piece of vintage technology we can use it for right now on the Retro Hack Shack. Okay, so before I open the box, I want to show you what this particular item is for. I think it'll make more sense if we start that way. So let's start with what it's for. And that's this. This is the Apple M0110A keyboard. And this was actually made in Japan, so it's ironic that the part that I got also came from Japan. But this keyboard was an early, ooh, look at this. Somebody fixed a missing foot here with a rubber washer. That's pretty funny. We'll have to take care of that. This particular keyboard, there was two that were kind of similar to this. One was, I think the very first keyboard that came out was just this part of the keyboard. And that was the M0110, not with the A. And I believe there was a separate keypad you could buy separately. And then a little bit later, I think maybe with the Mac Plus, you can correct me if I'm wrong, they introduced this keyboard, which had the numpad built into the keyboard, or along with the keyboard, all in the same case. So that's what this is. And when I look at this, it kind of reminds me of kind of a trend that's going on or has been going on for several years, especially in my line of work, which is the technology industry, in that people that type a lot have gotten into building their own keyboards. And a lot of times you'll see kind of like a reduced, there's certain percentages that they call out, like this is a 60% keyboard or something, but there's certain percentages that they call out, and this is about that same size compared to some of the reduced set keyboards that I've seen floating around the office. In fact, my son got one, and when you held them up side by side, of course his had a much smaller bezel around it, but when you held them up side by side, it was about that same form factor. Now, these newer keyboards, you can change out the keys with exactly the kind of keys you want. That's one of the features that they offer, and you can customize the colors and the lettering and all that kind of stuff. In fact, I think it would be fun to bring this into the office and hook it up to my laptop or another computer and just see what kind of looks I get from my coworkers to see if they can believe their eyes. Like, what kind of keyboard is this? But this is a cute little keyboard that kind of reminds me of those, and it has pretty good feel to it. There's a slight bump there, so we'll have to pull some of these keys off and see what kind of mechanism is under there. They are a bit loud, as you can hear. Let me just type on a few. So I don't know if you can hear, there's a bit of an echo, like the springs are echoing around inside the case. And I have no idea if this particular keyboard actually works because I don't own a Macintosh that was built in that era to be able to test with. I do have a Macintosh SE, and I just picked up today a Macintosh SE30 that's not working, but those use the ADB connection type that I believe Steve Wozniak came up with to replace this one. These older keyboards were connected via a port here with one of those curly cords that looked very much like a phone handset cord, but it was not a phone handset cord because it was pinned out differently. So you can't connect this keyboard, you can't just rip off an old phone handset cord and try to connect this to an old Mac. You have to have the correct cable or make your own. And so that's one thing I'm going to have to do today, is make my own cable to go with this. But just be aware, don't take a handset cord and try to connect it. It either won't work. There are some rumors floating around that say that it'll either brick the keyboard or brick the Mac. I don't think those are actually true, but it definitely won't work. So we're going to have to make that cable to get this working. So you might be wondering, well, why in the world are you going to the effort of creating a cable and getting it hooked up in the first place? And that brings us back around to this box and the reason that I got it. So this is from Japan. As I think I mentioned before, I ordered this almost a year ago. And because of the pandemic, I've been waiting for this box to arrive, and the cheap Japanese post wasn't delivering anything to the United States. You had to use a more expensive postal service, which I ended up saying, yeah, go ahead and use that more expensive postal service. I'll go ahead and eat the cost because it's been almost a year and I really want to try this out. There we go. Oh, nice. This is in a LSCS box. That tells you something about the person that built this if they're ordering components from lscs.com. Oh, this is just plastic wrap. That's a great way to do it. Just use plastic wrap instead of a bunch of tape. I used to work in a warehouse and been around shipping products for a while, and we used to use those big rolls, essentially of plastic wrap, to wrap up our pallets full of boxes and stuff so they wouldn't go flying all over the place in the trucks. Works really, really well. Here we go. Oh, and there's a cable already in here, included with it. Nice. So this is a converter that will allow you to, I believe, yep, this will allow you to hook up that keyboard I just talked about to a computer via this USB connection here. So you hook this up to the back of the keyboard, and then hook this up to your computer, and connect a micro USB to regular USB cable to your computer, and then you can type on this all day long. And you can see here, this looks very much like a handset. And if you buy these on eBay, actually, that doesn't guarantee that you're going to get the right cable. So it's always best to take a look at the cable before you use it and make sure that it is pinned out correctly. Essentially, these connections are supposed to be straight through. What I'll do, since I already have one of these as a reference, I will just go ahead and show you how I was going to make one. And then we can test this thing out on a computer and see if it works. Let's take a closer look at this board real quick. The person that I bought this from makes a lot of these types of adapters, and I'll put a link in the description below. And I thought about building one myself, but then when I looked at the work that he's already put into this, I decided it was probably better just to support him and get one that I know works right out of the box. And maybe if I had been doing my channel at the time, I would have done it myself so that I could walk through the process. But in this case, that was a long time ago now. So let's go ahead and open this up. Normally I'd leave this protective shrink wrap on here, but I'm going to go ahead and open it up so that we can take a look at what this chip is and what some of the other components are. So I'm not sure how well you can see this, but this is the TMK M0110 converter. Probably if you look up that TMK M0110 converter on Google, you will find a link for this as well if I don't put it in the description. In any case, here's the board itself. So the bulk of the board is taken up by the plug here. So this is my trick for taking a look at small chips like this, or with lettering on the chips that you can't see either because of the reflection or what have you. Go ahead and take a look through the camera here. We should be able to zoom right in. So now I can see it. I don't know if you can see it, but this is an Atmel Mega 320 32U2 or 32V2. So yeah, this is the same type of chip that powers an Arduino. So it's on board here. There's also a crystal over here, 16 megahertz crystal, which I believe is also the right megahertz for a 5-volt Arduino chip. So yeah, looks like a little, maybe perhaps an LED over here, some resistors and capacitors, and that's about it. So everything is basically being done at the microcontroller level. So the way that I would go about making a cord, if I didn't have one already provided, is to either buy or go to some place that might have some old phones and steal one of these handset cords. I bought one here. This is a Belkin 12-foot. 6 foot's probably better. I think that's what this is, maybe 6 or 8 feet coiled up. But this is a 12-foot, which is just the one that I was able to find. You can take this and then you can cut off the end and crimp on a new end. So I've got this. Let's take this out. Yeah, you can see that's quite a bit longer than this one actually. This is a 12-footer, but it should work fine. The other thing that you're going to need are some jacks, some loose jacks to put on the end. And these are not RJ11 jacks. These are actually, I think they're called RJ9s. But the thing that you want to look for is 4P 4C connectors. If you're going to buy this and do this yourself, this happens to be a 100-pack. It was like $5, so they don't cost that much. But you definitely look for the 4P 4C. 4-pin 4 connector, I think is what that means. 4 conductor, 4-pin 4 conductor. I'll look that up. But this is a little bit more narrow than your standard RJ11 that would be used to go from the telephone to the wall. So this is only really used in terms of telephony in the cord that goes from the handset to the telephone. So this one has a smaller connector. RJ11 is going to be bigger, and that's going to go to the wall. So important distinction there. The other thing that you're going to need to do this is what's in this box. And this is a crimp tool. This is a cheap crimp tool. But it allows you to put your cord in the jack, put your jack in there, and then when you squeeze it, it should crimp these little pins right here down onto the cord that you put inside the jack. This was fairly cheap or inexpensive, I should say. It does feel well built, but it was maybe $20, and it came with, I didn't know this when I had ordered those before, but it came with some 4 conductor jacks already with it. So yeah, I've got lots of these now. I've got about 200 if anybody needs some. So hopefully you can see the colors there. You should be able to, on a straight through cable, if you hold the jacks up like this, they should match. And you can see that they don't. We've got yellow, green, red, and black on one side, and the other side is just the opposite. So we've got black, red, green, and yellow. But on a straight through cable, those should match up exactly when you hold them side by side like this. And in this case, they're not. Now, one other thing I just noticed is on this board on the back, I don't know if you can see what that says right there, but it says cross. So he's got 2 connections here where you could put this jack, and I didn't realize this until just now. It's set up for the cross connections, and then he's got another set that's for straight through. So if I unsoldered this and put it over, then I could use a straight through cable. As it is, it's on the cross side, which means I can use these cables right out of the box, and they should be crossed. And I just checked the black cable that came earlier, and I thought this was a straight through cable, but when I hold it up like this, the colors are kind of pastel colors for some reason, but I can see that this is not a straight through cable. This is indeed a crossed cable. So he's got the board set up for crossed connection, and he sent a crossed cable. But I'm going to go ahead and turn this into a straight cable anyway, just so that you can see how to do it. So if I want to turn this cross cable into a straight cable, first thing we need to do is cut off the end as straight as you can make it. So now that is gone. And then we need to cut away, about the, you can use your jack and hold it up to the end where the wires are going to be buried in this jack here. You can hold it up like that and kind of figure out how much you need to take off. In this case, it's about 3/8, maybe a 1/4 inch that we need to take off. So we'll have to do this very carefully. It looks like on this there is a cutter that's meant for this specifically, and this might even be a guide to how far you have to cut it. Let's see. Yeah, that did a good job. So it actually did cut away without nicking the wires underneath, just enough cable. So that's a really nice feature of this cutting tool. I'm going to take away just a little bit more. There we go. That should be good. Now you don't have to strip away these wires underneath. They will fit in into the grooves in the jack, and you don't have to worry about stripping these. And then there's these pins, like I mentioned before, that will get pressed into the wires when we crimp it down in the crimper. The only thing you need to worry about at this point is, do you have it lined up correctly? So I want this to look exactly the same. I want to hold the jack the same way, and I want it to look the same. And what I can see is that it goes black, red, starting from this side over here, black, red, green, yellow. So I want to line up black, red, green, yellow. And then keeping those flat, I should just be able to push the wires into the grooves that are inside the jack. There we go. They feel like they're in there all the way. And you can see I've got some excess casing from the cord there, similar to what this one is. Actually, I have a little bit more than the manufacturer left in there, but that's okay. It fits in there, and what the important thing is to make sure that the wires go all the way to the end of the jack. But this should just slide in to the grooves that are inside of the jack, and then you can plug this into the crimp tool. There we go. Now it's in. Now all you have to do is squeeze, and it should crimp those pins into the wires. So let's try that. All the way till they're shut. Hold it for a few seconds. Let go. And now the gold pins that were out here have been pushed into the wire below, and it's nice and tight. It's nice and snug. It's not coming out. So if you ever need to make your own cable for this particular keyboard or this type of keyboard that has that, you'll know how to do it. It's really not that hard, and it's not very expensive either. But you do need to label this so that you know what it's for. I'm going to put a label on this so that I know this is for early Apple keyboards. I'll put some sort of a tag or use my label maker and make a label, and then I'll put this with my Macintosh stuff so that if I ever need one of these in the future that I want to hook directly up, I can do that, and I'll have a cable for it. Okay, so I've moved the camera a little bit to give a little bit better angle at what I'm actually doing here. I've got the keyboard connected with the black cord that came with it, not the new one I just made, because that won't work with this particular setup, right? And I've got this connected via a short USB cord over to my laptop, which is running Linux Mint. And I'm using Linux so that I can show some of the some more detailed information about the keyboard as I go along. So the first thing I want to do actually is unplug this and plug it back in. And the light comes on, it blinks once, and now I can go ahead and pull up a command prompt, and I can type in dmessage, and we can see what's going on here. So here you can see that it detected the USB device, and it set up a device file for it. Fairly generic. It does say here manufacturer TMK. So that's pretty cool. And it also has some more information here, TMK M0110 keyboard converter as, and then it gives the device file. So that's good. When you see that kind of information without any errors, then you know that usually what you plug in, for Linux anyway, is working correctly. And it seems like this is working correctly. So let's go ahead and fire up a text editor and we'll see if this works. Okay, I've made the font a little bit bigger, so hopefully it'll be easier to see, but let's just do a quick keyboard test. Yeah, that's working fine. Yeah, no problems at all. Everything's working. The numbers are working. Yeah, everything is working basically as I would expect from a normal keyboard test. Let's try some of the special keys. So tab, should tab, it does. Put some spaces in this particular editor, I guess. Shift, should do uppercase, and it does. Let's try the option key and the special key. I don't know what you call that in the Macintosh world. The option key, does that do control? If I do Control C, will that copy anything? I don't think it is. Let me just highlight some text here. Control C, nope. Control V. Oh, interesting. So Option must be bound to Alt because it just brought up the View menu. So I wonder if the other key is bound to Control. Nope. It doesn't seem to be bound to anything. That's interesting. Let's try the caps locks and see if that works for uppercase characters. So caps locks. Oh, wait a second. So caps locks appears to be bound to control, which is weird. And on this particular keyboard, there's no escape either. So I'm used to having escape up in this corner. I take caps lock off, but that's obviously not going to work. There is a clear key, which doesn't seem to be bound to anything at this point, although it is registering something. Oh, interesting. So clear must be bound to numlock. So numlock is clear, but there are some changes I'd like to make. I'd like to program an escape key, or at least have an alternate layout, perhaps, that I can use. And so let's take a look at the software. There is a keyboard editor, a Keymap editor that you can use. So let's go ahead and take a look at that and see if I can maybe change some of these keys around. Now, before I get into the Keymap editor, I just wanted to show you the web page that I found this on. This is geekhack.org. It's a forum post there, and this converter was made by a person, don't know if it's a woman or a man, but whose name is Hasu, and I've been communicating with Hasu about the shipping issues that have been going on during the human malware that we're experiencing. He or she seems like a super nice guy. I think it's a he. Seems like a super nice guy, and this site has a lot of really good resources for this. So if you're interested in getting one, highly recommend you check this out first. There's links to the GitHub page with more information, links to the wiki, information about the various revisions, how to build one yourself, actually, which is really cool. And he also has a warning here about pull-up resistors, saying that if you have a really long coiled cable, that you may need to add pull-up resistors. And I think somewhere in here he says, don't even talk to me unless you've added those pull-up resistors first. So this must be a pretty common issue. But anyway, yeah, there's a lot of really good information in here. And one of the things that he links to is the Keymap editor. So let's take a look at that. So here's the Keymap editor. And if this doesn't automatically come up, you can choose which keyboard you have. But as you can see, this particular layout here matches exactly the keyboard that I have. And so if I want to remap the keyboard, the first thing I have to do is pick a key that I want to remap. So for example, I'm pretty sure I want to emulate more of a Intel style keyboard. So I don't necessarily want this key to be left alt. So if I click on that, and then I go down here to the action codes, I can say I want this to be left control, and it'll do that. And then the key right next to it, oh, that's the Windows key. That's what that does. Click on that, and I'm going to say I want to change that to left alt. The thing is, do I want this to be, I don't want this to be control. I want it to be a real caps lock. So is there a way to do that? Let's just see. Okay, I turned it on caps lock. And then interestingly enough, they've mapped this key down here to the layouts. Now you can have up to seven different, they call them layers here, but I call them layouts of the keyboard. So if I wanted to have a different layout, for example, that mapped these keys here, which didn't have arrows, but they do now because it has a numlock function. When you turn numlock on, it adds the arrows. But let's just say I didn't have that. I could actually go in here and click these and then add the appropriate arrows. So there's an up arrow, down arrow, and so forth. So you could have an alternate layout here, and then you could hit the hotkey. If I go back to layer 0, this hotkey essentially here will change to layer 1. So if I had a certain layout for a game that I wanted to play, or maybe I wanted to change to another character set or something like that, Japanese is in here, and Korean as well, then I could just map those to a different layer and switch to that layer whenever I want. So that's a really cool added feature. I really like this so far. It's just a web page, which is interesting. It's not a GUI thing you have to download. You just go to this web page and you can change these things. There's also some special functions in here. You'll notice there's these layer switch, toggle switch. You can set up your keys so that you just, instead of holding them down like shift, you can hit it once and it'll stay on until you hit it again and turn it off. There's all kinds of really interesting things you can do in here with these action codes. And then when you're done, you can just download the firmware, which I'm going to do now just by hitting download button. And you can also load, if you have a saved firmware somewhere and you want to load the Keymap from that firmware, you can do that as well. The other really neat thing before I download this that I wanted to show is, let's say that you went to this website and you designed everything exactly how you wanted it to for your keyboard, but you wanted to share that with your buddy. You can do that really easily by, down here, there's share URL. You can hit the raw URL, and I'm assuming that if you copy this whole long URL and give it to your buddy, they would be able to pull this up on any of their machines, and that would pull up the key map and all the settings that you've defined so far, so that they could then take that and download their firmware as well. And he also even offers a URL shortener here through Bitly, and so you could just share that short URL and say, hey, here's my key map that I designed last night. I think you're really going to like it, whatever, and they can download that. So really cool, and it's all done just in a browser, just in a browser page. So I think it's pretty neat that he was able to get this level of functionality for a key map editor just with a web page like this. So I'm going to go ahead and download this. We'll save it, and then we'll upload it to the microcontroller. Okay, so according to the instructions, I'm going to be using this DFU programmer file. For Linux, apparently this works on Windows, Mac, or Linux. You can also use this other program called Flip. I've seen people doing videos using Flip for Windows, but I'm on Linux. And since this is cross-platform, this might be a better option anyway. So I've installed this onto my laptop here. And the first steps here says to boot into programming mode. So to do that, I'm just going to, I'll show you what the difference is. So I'm going to unplug this and plug it back in. And remember, before we looked at the some of the output information that we saw when we plugged this in. So let's look at that again. Okay, so this looks very similar to what we saw before, right? Here's the product, the manufacturer, and some information about some files that it's set up and so forth. But there's a little button on the module, and I'm going to press that. And then I'm going to run this again, this command, dmessage. And now you can see, here's that old information I had at the top of the window. But down here, you can see now that this is actually recognized this, since I hit that programming button, as a ATmega 32U2 and manufacturer AppMel. So now it's recognized it in a different mode. So we should be able to use this these commands now to reprogram with the new key map. The next step is to erase the existing firmware. So let's try that and see if it works. I may have to run sudo to run this as root. I'm not sure, but let's just try it. So I'm going to type in DFU programmer and then the controller, which in this case is ATmega 32U4, erase. No device present. Okay, well, I think I see the problem. My laptop detected this as ATmega 32U2, not U4. So I'm going to try putting that in the command. I still may have to run sudo, but let's just see if that works. No device present. Let's try it with sudo. Oh, there we go. Now it works. Yeah, so if you're running this on Linux, just do an LSUSB like I did here. That's going to list all your USB devices and figure out what this is coming up as. For me, it's coming up as ATmega 32U2. So now I should be able to program this with the flash command, and you do have to run sudo on Linux. All right, so I'm going to flash the firmware file just by using the flash command, which is the next one on the instructions here. Validating, done. That was quick. And now we can reset. Boom, done. It reset the board, it came back up. Let's see if it's still working. I'll just use the command prompt here. Yep, that all works. Let's go back to the text editor and see if control is working. So if I do I mapped control to option, so if I hold down option C, that should be control C. And let me click and do option V, which should be paste. Oh yeah, I clicked in the wrong spot, but it did paste it. Click this again. Option C, click down here somewhere, option V, yep, that all seems to be working. Let's try the caps locks now. Caps lock is on. Yeah, that's working great. So I think this is a success. I think this is going to work out really well. This keyboard is pretty nice to type on, actually. Let me just give you a sample of what it sounds like. Not a fast typer, but there it is. But yeah, it's pretty pleasant to type on. I think the only thing I want to do now is to take a look at the keys or the switches themselves, and we still have to fix that foot on the bottom. So let's do that. So I just want to pull a couple of these keycaps off and see if I can see what kind of mechanisms these are. Ooh, pretty tight. All right, well, these definitely don't look like Alps. I thought they might be Alps, but I don't think so. Yeah, definitely mechanical, but I don't think they're Alps. They have a different shape than I'm used to seeing with Alps. I'm going to take a look at this on the web and see if I can figure out what these are. Okay, so for those of you who are already keyboard aficionados, you know this site already, but a lot of times if I'm researching a particular type of key switch or keyboard, especially old keyboards, I go to Desthority, the Desthority wiki, and they've got all kinds of information here about keycaps, switches, keyboards themselves. But let's take a look at the page for this keyboard, the Apple M0110A, and it looks like they've got some information here which we've already talked about. And then, yeah, down here, variations. So there was actually, it looks like 3 or 4 different variations. There was an Alps version made in the United States, and there was a Mitsumi version made in Japan. And this we saw on the label that this keyboard was made in Japan, so these must be Mitsumi switches. There's also a Malaysian version that uses Mitsumi switches, and then there's one that was made in Taiwan that uses SMK switches. And you can see down here they got some pictures of the different models, and yeah, the Alps switches kind of look, they have a certain look to them. You know, they look a certain way, and they're a little bit longer typically. I think there's short versions and long versions. It looks like perhaps they use the long versions in these. And then here's the Mitsumi model, and you can see here, yeah, that looks exactly like what I've got. So these definitely must be Mitsumi versions. And then let's just take a look at what the SMK ones look like too. So there's the SMK switches. Now these look, to me, this looks very similar to like a Commodore 64 in some way. So I don't know, did the Commodore 64 use SMK switches? Or maybe I'm thinking of the VIC-2 or the VIC-20 rather. Let me know if you know if either the VIC-20 or Commodore 64 uses SMK switches, but these look like what I'm used to seeing when I clean up a Commodore 64. In any case, at least we know that these are Mitsumi switches. They go back on with a little ping. That's kind of nice. Okay, well, the last thing I need to do is to fix this foot right here. I don't know. This looks like it was glued on or something. So I'm going to see if I can get this off. Hopefully it'll just come off easily. There we go. It's not too bad, but I'm just going to clean it with a little isopropyl alcohol. And as a type 1 diabetic, I have a lot of these alcohol prep pads. Now, these are 70%, but they do a pretty good job. Typically I like to use 90 or 99% IPA, but these little prep pads, you know, you got a nice little cloth built in, and you can go over things pretty easily, and then if that doesn't take care of it, you can always go back and get the stronger stuff. Okay, that's nice and clean. All I need to do now is find a suitable foot to put in here. And I may not actually have one that size. You don't see very many, I don't know what color this is, gray or beige feet like this. So yeah, I'll have to be on the lookout for some of these gray rubber feet and see if I can find some. But for now, I'll just put this ugly little thing. It's not much better than the washer, but at least it's the right height. So that should do just fine. Yeah, perfectly level. So I am really glad I finally got to get that package that I was waiting for almost a year. This works really well. I'd highly recommend going and checking this out. Hasu has, designed lots of different models of this for different keyboards, but I think they're all pretty much based on the same microcontroller and design and all that kind of stuff. But if you're interested in converting one of your old vintage keyboards into something that'll work with USB, I highly recommend it. The configuration program for the Keymap layout, whatever you want to call it, was really top notch. I mean, I was really impressed with what he did there. Just using a web page to redo the layout, download the firmware, and then upload it easily. Lots of information online. Just be careful if you do want to order this exact one. I know as of this recording, he's still not able to send these out via the cheap Japanese post. He has to use the more expensive, much more expensive, I think it's Yamato post, and I think he also offers either Federal Express or DHL maybe, but they're really, really expensive. So yeah, if you're interested, check this out. Just know that it might be a bit of a delay if you want the cheap shipping. With that, thank you very much. If you like this episode, please like and subscribe. Tried to keep this episode a little shorter than my other ones to give people a little break, because sometimes my episodes can be long. But I really appreciate everybody that's subscribed, especially since I'm almost up to 1,000 subscribers as of this taping. I just need I think another 100 or so to go. So if you haven't yet subscribed, please do so. And I've got something special planned for that 1,000th episode. It's coming up soon. Until next time, thanks for watching. If you want to support me on Patreon, you can go to patreon.com/retrohackshack and sign up. If you support me at a high enough level, you can get your picture in the credits, just like Parker here.
End of line.